We have, believe me, many penal codes that cover conduct, that cover both conduct for housed people and unhoused people. So I'm hopeful that when you look closely, you'll see that this isn't the way to go. And I wanted to read, it's a dissenting opinion in 1995 by Stanley Mosk, a very highly respected member of the Supreme Court for many years, in Toby versus the city of Santa Ana, an anti-camping ordinance in 1995. And here's what he said: arresting or citing the homeless for sleeping in public also burdens the freedom of movement because they must either forego sleep or leave the city altogether to avoid criminal penalty. Moreover, as discussed above, the primary purpose for enforcing the ordinance against the homeless was to drive them out of the public arenas. The indirect effect of the ordinance may prove even more invidious. As one amicus curiae, a former mayor, points out, ordinances like Santa Ana's encourage an unhealthy and ultimately futile competition among cities to impose comparable restrictions in order to avoid becoming a refuge for homeless persons driven out by other cities. The case at bar provides a striking example of this domino effect. In response to the Santa Ana ordinance, surrounding communities quickly enacted similar measures to protect themselves from an influx of Santa Ana's homeless. To carry this effect out to its logical conclusion, if all communities followed suit, the homeless could effectively be included from the entire state of California. Please don't be part of that. Let's come up with alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public like to speak on this issue? I'll bring it back to Councilman Bobby.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we need to give the police some leverage here. I certainly don't want Atherton to become a place where we have dozens of people sleeping in their cars. And in view of the fact that Palo Alto just passed an ordinance, you know, we could, as the latest speaker said, we could just see that the kind of movement up to Atherton where we have quiet streets, probably you can get a nice quiet sleep here if you're in your car. So my own feeling is that I think we need to pass some kind of an ordinance that gives the police the opportunity to keep the environment that we're all used to in Atherton. And I certainly don't think that environment is having lots of cars with people sleeping in them, apart from the obvious crime problem that it brings. On the other hand, I think we maybe need to modify the ordinance slightly, because in private property, if somebody has an RV and they want to park it in the driveway and have their kids sleeping there overnight, I don't think that's a big problem. And therefore, I think maybe we need to modify the ordinance slightly so that we can allow people who are not transients to use the property if they so desire for, occasional visits of the family, for instance, who may have an RV. So that's my feeling, is I think we need an ordinance. We don't want this to become an environmental problem for Atherton, but I think we need to maybe modify it slightly to help people who are doing something on private property with their families not to be breaking the law.
Okay. Councilman Ritter.
First off, I agree with Councilmember Dobby with regards to any exclusions about upon public or private property, because the way it's written, it could be taken very literally, and I know that we spoke with the city attorney earlier, and he felt that there were ways to get around it, but you don't want to tell your kids or a Cub Scout troop that they can't camp out in your backyard, or preclude relatives coming in an RV, and as long as they're not violating the noise ordinance with a compressor or things like that, there shouldn't be a problem. That said, I understand that our police need to have some way of taking care of any problems if somebody's quote unquote pretending to sleep while waiting to break into a house. They need to be able to move people along. I'm very conscious of the homeless issue with my work for the sick and the poor with the Knights of Malta. And so we do spend a fair amount of time up at Maple Street, working with the homeless there, as well as other places in the city. And I feel that, just like Palo Alto did, perhaps there may be something that the town might consider to do similar along those lines to try and help fund or expand some of those activities. So we're not just pushing the activity along, but and acting in a heartless manner, say not on our backyard, but being able to maybe help facilitate or improve things. So I'm not suggesting that we, not being the size of Palo Alto or having the financial breadth and depth of Palo Alto, where they gave $250,000 to the Santa Clara homeless shelters to build 20 additional beds. But I think that, it would be, a step in the right direction if we could at least consider that. I know we do with the heart. Maybe we should consider growing that or something. So I do think that there should be something that we could do other than just saying no, but I would like to see this ordinance, have stop after the word public parking lot.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Councilman East.
Thank you. Obviously, the ordinance is focused on public areas, not private property. So that's, something that I think that we have to kind of focus a little bit in on. I don't believe 602 of the Penal Code focuses on public areas. That's private property. So I think that this ordinance is written to really focus on, some of the issues that we could have, some of the issues we do have in public areas, and therefore it gives us the ability to have legal contact with people that are in public areas. So therefore, I am supportive of something along these lines. People that are camping, as far as motorhomes, generators, we also got to be, cognitive of the fact that those generators do disturb the neighbors, and obviously those contacts are already going to be made, I would assume. So I'm supportive of moving forward with an ordinance.
Okay. So I think I'm in total agreement with my fellow council members about the wording in this ordinance or upon any private property. I guess because I've had elderly parents who were in a camper group, and they came down on a trip and parked their RV in my driveway and stayed overnight a couple of nights and came down for Thanksgiving. It's sort of like maybe camping out in the accessory structure, so maybe if we put like a time limit, that you can't park an RV in your driveway and sleep in it for an extended period of time or something like that. That might be good. I was going to ask if, how does Palo Alto's ordinance compare to this ordinance? Do they say private property? I don't know either. I didn't look it up before tonight's meeting. And then I think Councilmember Widmer's idea about possibly, we do have a heart for people who, are in economic distress and maybe don't have a home but need to have a place to sleep. But there are shelters in other locations that they can take advantage of. Maybe if we can figure out a way to do a funding, I think that's an excellent idea, to make some kind of
Madam Mayor, can I address a couple of those points for your consideration?
Yeah.
First of all, Penal Code Section 602 requires a no trespassing sign or verbal demand from the owner or occupant to leave the premises. So if the owner's not home and doesn't choose to put up one of those really beautiful no trespassing signs, then any person, and by the way, this has nothing to do with status. It doesn't say homeless, it doesn't apply to homeless, it applies to anybody. It could be somebody who has an axe to grind or anything else that just pulls in. My experience has been, by the way, homeless are the most vulnerable people to be allowed to park for instance, a city park, because that's where sometimes unsavory people go to hang out and they prey upon them. Now, they don't have a lot to give them, so what they take is everything. And I think that you can accomplish what you want with respect to private property if you say, or upon private property when the occupant is not present. That way, if the owner is present, it's the owner's call.
That's right.
Okay.
And this.
Because what you're saying is that then that gives the officers the right, the law to approach this person and say, you're trespassing,
Right.
you know,
And
even though you're in the driveway of someone's home.
Correct, and that has happened recently. Particularly dangerous in Atherton is the fact that many of our, in fact, almost all of our streets don't have curb gutter and sidewalk. And
Right.
because of that, people can pull over and park in a way that somebody gets up at 7 o'clock to jog in the morning, or I don't know why, but, and then they're forced to go out into the street to go around that vehicle because we don't have a sidewalk for them to go on. And I think the ordinance is narrowly tailored not to focus on homeless individuals. In fact, I don't believe we have a homeless problem. It's tailored to focus on vehicles that might be parking in unsafe places or in an unsafe manner, and parking in somebody's.
With someone in it.
And parking in somebody, camping, I don't mean to say, and by the way, it's only vehicles, so technically somebody could, even a homeless person could throw up a little tent somewhere along the way, and this doesn't address that. Now, it might not be safe in all the same ways, but I think the vehicle pushing somebody out into the roadway is something that's much more of a safety issue.
Okay.
I agree.
So do you feel good about
Yeah.
the addition of that language?
These changes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the addition of that language, can I call for a motion to approve this ordinance?
Introduce it.
To
Set public
introduce
hearing.
this.
Set the public hearing
Okay.
as amended.
Yes.
So
I'll second you, just for fun. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You guys are snoozing over here. Okay, so I think that's reasonable.
Can we also sometime in the future revisit as our budget progresses, additional contribution to assist with some solutions?
Staff will bring that up as part of the budget process in
Can you
14-15.
direct staff to do that?
And
Thank you.
And through the chair, can I ask the chief, if I'm not mistaken, don't we provide, if we have contact with somebody, some sources of options through the county, when officers make contact with people, some direction if they need help?
We do. We have an extensive referral list, both in the comm center, a lot of the officers carry it on, and we try to help people. I'm glad the city attorney made the comments he did, because what generally happens is we're not going to people's homes asking people on motorhomes or Cub Scouts to get out of the yard. Basically, we'll find a vagrant or somebody that's laying in somebody's yard, obviously doesn't live there, different ID, and we catch them a couple of times, and it's helpful to be able to do something with them to get it started, and so that's what the city manager was referring to, with another tool in the bag, of a way to be able to legally take somebody in custody. And 602 doesn't provide that unless the owners are saying, hey, I want him to leave, or it's posted no trespassing.
And even then,
Thank you, chief.
if the owner says, I want you to leave, and the person leaves, you can't do anything. That could be a person that was there to burglarize, saw a car come by with a spotlight, jumped down and feigned being asleep. And at that point in time, if the owner comes out and said, well, I don't know who this guy is, I want you to leave, there's nothing the police officer can do. He gets to walk, and it's a free pass.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to bring item number 15 up to the, what about 15?
Well, since we moved 15 to the regular agenda.
We've got to do,
We did put 13, 15
13
in.
and 15.
I know, but
We're
you
gonna
said
do
that
that at the end.
15 went to the regular agenda.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that went before we pulled.
15, am I right?
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm going to do 15.
Pleasure, council, in terms of order.
Yes.
15 it is.
So, it's the SBWNA refuse and recycling rates discussion, and we're going to let Robert Barron III. It's a receive and file, there's no action.
Good evening, Mayor, council, members of the public. Before you is just a review and discussion regarding our refuse rates that we have for our town. Just to give you a bit of background. In 2009, as a member of the SBWMA, which is South Bay Waste Management Authority, which we are a member, we entered into a 10-year exclusive franchise agreement with Recology, and that's for the collection, recycling, and disposal of materials within our town limits. The franchise will expire in 2019, at which time the Waste Management Authority will go out to a rebid process for a new contract, whether it's with the current contractor or a new contractor. And part of the process that each city, each agency is responsible for setting their local collection rates based on the revenue requirements for the collection within the town for the contractor. So that's set by the SBWMA. So that's kind of a background about it. On the SBWA, there's a council member that sits on the board, and then also our city manager sits on the technical advisory board for SBWMA. So,
Now appointed vice chair, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
Are
really?
you the vice chair?
I'm the vice chair, so we're gonna get stuff done.
Oh, wow, that's even better.
That's good.
Wow.
We got some
Right.
power now.
Yeah.
All right.
And
We're gonna get that fixed allocation as soon as we drive it down.
Those trucks paying.
That's good to know.
Evan?
Well, we're making progress. And just to go based from the background, just to give you, well, we also have our own solid waste committee here in Atherton, and Mr. Widmer, Councilmember Widmer, and Vice Mayor Weiss are part of that committee. And the last couple of months, we've been meeting to go over the rate setting process for our current rates and see where we are regarding our rate settings and whether we're meeting the revenue requirement to pay for the collection of our refuse. And so in that process as well, we met with SBWMA management to kind of get data regarding our city and our collection process. So we went over a couple things. We went over our refuse service requirement, that our town refuse service revenue requirement, our rate stabilization fund balance, rate projections, and we went over the franchise terms and contract discussion. So as we went through that, it was determined that back when we set our rates in 2012, we set it with the intention that the rate stabilization fund would actually allow us to smooth and keep our rates constant. So this was the intention, is having this rate stabilization fund when we set our rates in 2012. And so this was help mitigate any future rate increases. So after reviewing our 2014 revenue projections with SBWMA, the committee met and looked at the cost for a contractor going forward and our current revenue requirement that we need in meeting the collection of our refuse. And then we discussed over what would transpire in the future years regarding the contractor costs. Currently, right now, they're kept constant, and that's something we will continue to monitor as we get from year within each year as we go forward. We'll continue to monitor that, and monitor any escalation in costs. So it was determined that because of our revenue projections and where we stand, there was no need to have a rate increase for our garbage and our recycling rates. So what does that mean? That means our rate stabilization is smoothing out our rates, and so we don't have to come back and increase rates for our garbage and recycling. So we've came to that conclusion. We will continue to meet.
Except for the green rates, that's because that's recycling.
Right, the main rates. And the only other thing is we came to recommended that the council, the committee recommended to council that they address the cost alignment for the green can card collections. So that's what we want to proceed with the council and getting council's recommendation of trying to raising the green can card collections to be more of a recovery model based on where we currently have our rates. So right now, just to give you an example, cards 3 and 4 for residents is $10 each per month, and cards 5 and above are $15 each per month. So the committee has recommended to council that for cards 3 and 4, instead of $10 each per month, raise it to $11 each per month. And carts 5 and above go from $15 to $17. They feel that this would be more of give us to a true cost recovery. And to give you an example, for the actual cost of those, it's $19. It's approximately $19 for the cost of each of those cans. So we want to try to get to a more true cost recovery. We're not clearly at a full cost recovery on those green carts. So what we're recommending is to, as a committee, is recommending to keep everything the same as for the garbage and recycling, but come and present and recommend to the council that we entertain raising our green card rates. And doing so would require starting a 218 process. With that being said, we will continue as a committee, continue to monitor our rates. The good news is for right now, there's no increases in the main garbage refuse rates, and we'll continue to ensure that we have our rate stabilization fund smooths out those rates going forward.
Can I ask a question? Okay. So the first 2 green carts are free.
They're included in
They're included in.
They're included in the
They're
rate.
free.
Yep.
They're included in your base rate.
Mhm.
So if you have 3 or 4 carts, it's $10 each now.
Right.
Okay. Well, the new
$10,
rate would be $11,
Yeah.
the new rate.
per car.
Per cart,
Per cart.
so it'd be $22 per cart, just to, yeah. How many residents have more than 2 carts, say 3 and 4 carts? Do we have an idea about that?
Yeah.
And then how many residents have 5 and above?
I have to look up my email, but I did that calculation,
You
sent
did.
it off to George and to Carrie this morning, but I didn't bring it with me. Why don't you just read it off? You have it?
Carrie's going for it.
Carrie's got it on his
Carrie's
email.
got it.
Wait a minute, I'm the slowest.
Really, he is not playing
This-
Mario.
The majority of
Brothers.
there's like less than 17% of total residents have 3 or more carts. I remember the numbers, and it's like 4% have
5 or more.
5 or more, and some residents are in the 30s. And so at $15 a cart times 30, that's what their neighbors are subsidizing them at. Because it's about $20, it's 1931, it's gone up a
$5 a
little
cart.
bit.
You said 15. Oh, at $15 a cart.
Yeah,
but
right.
They're subsidizing $4 each.
Yes, that's almost exactly right. Per his email, 17.9%,
What a mind.
and 4.7%.
Impressed.
So
4%
of 5,000
no,
5,000 homes.
2,500 homes.
2,500.
2,500 homes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you remember when we made the presentation in November, there was a Pareto. And
Equal?
yeah, I did the number of houses that had the carts and then how many they had at each location. And there was a curve, and we said the majority of the people will be unaffected by this.
Yeah.
And 3 and 4, why we made that number lower is because that essentially was the asymptotic part of the curve.
Yeah.
So the majority of the people were way out here,
Mhm.
and those people had very, very large lots, and they had very, very large number of bins.
Right.
And so, and why is this important? Well, there's several aspects to the cost. Now, Recology has a fixed fee, and they have a CPI that's applied to it on a regular basis. But then there's other costs associated with disposal and processing of the waste that they pick up and they bring to the transfer station, and then it gets parceled out to wherever we're going to send it, either to a landfill or out to to sell it, and where we get cost recovery, by the way. But there's an allocation that's based on that. So if they're one of our reasons our allocation keeps going up year after year, and why our rates are a lot higher from sister cities, is that this organics is taking a lot of time to pick up. Our rates last year, our allocation went up 6.8% last year, because the people in Recology are getting very adept at picking up things in the bigger cities, and there's really not much more they can do here in Atherton with all the greenways. So it would be helpful, actually, if we could get down the number of green carts, and, because that will save us money as well as save us costs with regards to the allocation as well.
Okay,
Thank you for listening.
sure. So 4% of 2,500 is like 100?
Yes.
Okay, times $4 that they're being subsidized now. 400, so $4, so that's 400 per month, times 12 is 4,800 per year. It looks like 17%, is that 425?
Something like that, yeah. I don't know the
Times-
exact number.
Times $9
It's not raising a lot of money.
is 3,700, 3,800 a month. I mean, we're really subsidizing the 3 and 4 carts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's the money loser,
well,
we have a lot.
times 12,
what we're
right?
trying, I mean, if the council would support going at a cost basis on carts 3 through N, I'm more than happy to support that. I thought that would be a bridge too far. Hopefully, some people will look at the number of green carts they have with this minor raise, and maybe they'll dispose of 1 or 2. And one of the things that we found, and Recology has also reported to us back, from the early days, is that in many cases, the gardeners fill up our green carts with
stuff.
refuse from another jurisdiction.
I've seen it.
And so we've got to do something, and to at least raise awareness, but if you want to go more, that's fine. I just didn't think that we needed the money per se.
Sure.
I don't wanna go.
Vice Mayor Weeks?
I know Bill spent a ton of time, and I thank Bill for all the time that he has spent on this. And one of the goals that we had in committee was to try to make it attractive to reduce the number of people that had the larger amount of bins. So even though the discrepancy in the cost seems, like you said, it's not much, the goal is to reduce the amount of green bins that we do produce. So to keep that as quasi-attractive and not hammer people. And it's also something that we can look at, as we have done, on a yearly basis, if we feel next year it's something that we should readdress, or in 2 years, it's
But
something.
it seems that, is it mostly yard waste or is it food compost? Because one of the objectives was having the green bins take not only yard waste, but food compost, so that would take that out of the solid black waste.
Yeah, just,
So what's the, maybe.
Well, maybe
Kevin-
Gino could speak to that.
Gino can,
Mayor Lewis, members of the council, Gino Gaspari with Ecology. In Atherton, and I can speak directly as I've actually done surveys and been out on the trucks myself, the vast majority, although people do participate in the organics program, the pizza boxes, things of that nature, it is organics. It is your yard waste, it is your tree limbs and things of that nature.
Okay, all right. Can we open it up for the public, if anyone wants to comment on this? It seems like we've gotten quite successful in reducing our black cans. Lee, from
Yeah,
the
the
committee?
migration has gone down.
yeah,
The migration from the big cans down to the smaller cans has been very successful.
Even though they're really small.
The 20-gallon ones, actually, they got a new one.
Really? I didn't get
It's
one.
got around it, well, all you have to do is ask, and they'll figure it out.
I want one.
Can I make a comment?
Yes,
I use 4 cans, 4 green cans. And one of the things is that clearly, this is a town, we're called a tree city. So we want to keep this town as green as possible. And, I have a pretty nice yard and, pretty intensely cultivated, and I use 4 cans most of the summer. And therefore, I don't think that we want to try to get people to turn it into, sand lots, because that's not the way our town is supposed to be. So I would just say that I don't mind adding $1 to the green waste cans, but I don't think we want to discourage people from doing a lot of nice work in their yards. And therefore, I would just accept what they're recommending here.
So I only have 2 cans, and if my landscapers fill up my 2 cans, they haul away the rest and bill me for it. I don't have the luxury of having extra land for them to stockpile it for the next time or anything. So, I don't know. What, do you ever have your landscapers haul away some stuff and bill you for it?
And what?
And Billy?
Bill you for it directly?
Charge me for it directly?
Yeah.
Once in a while I have to, you know, when I'm doing a huge cleanup, our gardener, who I think very highly of, we have to pay him to take stuff to the dump.
Yes, yes, me
But
too.
that happens very, very rarely. I would say 90% of the time our 4 green cans can accommodate everything. And I would say most of the time they're full.
Okay. Any other comments? I just thank you guys for doing all of this and keeping your head around it. It's really good. So glad city manager's now vice chair of this. Next time you'll be chair next year.
Well, I think Councilmember Whitmer's heading for chair of the board, and I'll be chair of the TAC
Of the
committee,
TAC
and then we'll
committee?
just
You
rule the
can
world.
dominate.
Before we leave this item, Madam Mayor, it's
Yes.
purely a receive and file. We'll continue with the 218 process at, next few months from now, and that's gonna be a very public process. But I wanted to provide some additional information. We've learned that there's labor negotiations ongoing presently, and it affects refuse services. The labor negotiations are between Recology and the Teamsters Local 350 for Recology's drivers, mechanics, and clerical workers. And as you know, Recology is the franchisor, or the franchisee, for recycling, compost, and garbage collection services to member agencies of the SBWMA. The current labor agreements are set to expire next week. Similar negotiations are also taking place between South Bay Recycling and Teamsters Local 350 for pretty much the same personnel. Those contracts expire at the same time, and SBR is the operator of the environmental facility. We're not a participant in these labor negotiations. They're between Recology and SBR's employees. Recology and SBR are keeping us informed of any significant updates related to those negotiations, and the public is free to call them for any details that they might want. These negotiations are not expected to have any impacts on local rates. Previous labor agreements honored the terms negotiated by Allied Waste, the service provider and facility operator prior to Recology and SBR. And the town and Rethink Waste, SBWMA, will actively monitor collection and facility operations for any service interruptions. And we're encouraging the public, if you do experience a service interruption, please let the town know immediately and or call Recology directly.
You mean like if they're gonna strike or something?
If they miss a pickup in any way, shape, or form.
That could happen. It's next Wednesday at midnight that the agreements expire on the 23rd. And they're not anticipating anything, and so there's not cause for concern. However, we need to be aware. But the key issue is that it might be a slowdown, there might be whatever. But at the board meetings, they specifically asked us to make sure that if there are any outages, that we do report them. And so, it's just like when we started out at the beginning,
Right, the hiccups.
yeah, we called into the city, so they can either call directly or they can call the city and we'll get the data because we have some remedies that we need to keep track of. And so it's real important that we do that, and this information is, updating on a periodic basis.
Okay,
So, I don't know, Gene, do you have anything to add on that?
is that it?
That's it.
Okay. All right. So continuing on with our regular agenda, I'd like to take item number 19, which is is that okay with you guys?
19 it is.
I'm gonna do those other two at the very end. That's what you get for. So, for ratifying the memorandum of understanding between the town of Atherton and the Atherton Police Officers Association. City Manager Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you know, the town's been engaged in meet and confer obligations with the APOA. We have reached a tentative agreement. That's what's presented before the council this evening in the form of the MOU and a second side letter, which I'll address later in the conversation here. The MOU provides the town cost savings that represents a minimum of 7.6% of salaries and future cost savings through the meeting of some major policy objectives, which are kind of indeterminate costs. We don't know what those are going to be yet, but there will be savings. There are 6 major areas of change within the MOU. The first is the format of the MOU. The second is compliance with AB 340, which is the pension plan, the second tier pension plan. The third is a cafeteria plan at the health rates of Kaiser rates with cost sharing and caps. The fourth is elimination of town-paid retiree health care. The fifth is elimination of employer-paid member contributions for pension obligations. And the sixth is elimination of the required 70th percentile matching. Each of these provide benefits both to the town and the APOA. There is cost savings to the town in the long term of this 3-year MOU. Format of the MOU, language of the MOU, that's pretty self-explanatory. That provides the town with a better working relationship with the APOA represented employees and some clarity. The old contract was archaic in many areas, had some language that was, didn't comply with current law. So we had to do some major updates. We totally rewrote this MOU and started from scratch. The second was compliance with AB 340, which is the Tier 2 pension system. It was implemented in 2013 and takes effect for the APO MOU with its ratification this evening. AB 340 provisions apply to new members as defined by CalPERS. One of the primary purposes of AB 340 is to reduce the overall amount of pension available to new members upon retirement through new formulas and limitations on pensionable compensation. And the report goes through what some of those things are, but it does provide a savings to the town. It represents significant cost savings through a reduction in the pension obligations for the town, and it'll be shown to the town in future valuations done by CalPERS, which are required every year. The third change was the CalPERS health plan at Kaiser rates, the cafeteria plan with cost sharing caps. The current MOU sets the town's share of medical premiums at 90% of the CalPERS Blue Shield HMO rate for single plus one, and family directly to CalPERS. The 2014 rates are $837 for single, $1,673 for single plus one, and $2,175 for family. The new MOU provides premiums through an IRS Section 125 plan at 90% of the Kaiser rate, a much less expensive plan, and the town's contribution is capped at that dollar amount, not a percentage, and increases above 3% in the plan's premiums are shared 50-50 between the employee and the town for any increases beyond that cap. The employee is responsible for the first 3%. There are 22 authorized positions within the MOU. All 22 presently are eligible to receive 90% of the Blue Shield HMO rate. Potential liability for the town is about $574,000 without a cap. With the reduction in the Kaiser cap, the potential liability is capped, and the 50-50 share beyond 3%, that's a difference of about $115,000. This represents a 5% of base salary savings for the 22 authorized positions within the MOU. A third change is elimination of retiree health care. This is actually accomplished through implementation of the cafeteria plan under PEMCA rules, which is the Public Employee Medical and Hospital Care Act. The only way, PEMCA rules say that you've got to contribute, what you contribute for active employees, you must contribute for retirees in terms of health care. The only way around that requirement is to say to both, we're going to contribute the minimum, which is the PEMCA minimum requirement.